The second thing I thought about was branded checkouts. If you think about where Cash App and Square are going, and where Venmo and the PayPal checkout can go, they've actually got a two-sided market, and they can start to move transactions off of card rails towards honors transactions and share those economics with the merchants, but also share much more data in that flow. So that was kind of, branded checkouts have higher conversion. They're really, really effective. They're really, really good. They take care of the experience. But that branded checkout plus wallet combo, that's really interesting. Now I can get into dealing with returns and logistics, a bit like Shop Pay has done, a bit like Apple Pay has done. But what does that Apple Pay like experience feel like for auto steering from your card? What would Apple do with Visa Flexible Credential? I think that is where this starts to get a little bit more interesting. And Apple moves in 10-year increments, especially at the moment, especially when they're not doing terrible advertising. But they will eventually get there, and I think there's an interesting conversation to be had when they do.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good point. And just to add one final note on that, it is a really interesting question as to who ends up controlling that wallet, right? Because obviously, if you're a bank or a credit card issuer, you're probably not thrilled about the ability for consumers to optimize their card spend across multiple cards. So you might not sort of naturally love this idea, but you have to kind of think, okay, so you don't want to offer this. You just want people to continue to use their card. That's fine. But if you don't offer this, if you don't create this sort of intelligent wallet layer on top of the payments that you offer, you might lose the ability to have any influence over where customers are being steered to, right? And to your point, if you cede that ground to Cash App and to PayPal and to Apple and to whoever else, those wallets might have a lot less loyalty to like banks and card networks in general, right? And so you could definitely see a world in which someone like an Apple controls that wallet layer, and they basically say, okay, look, credit card issuers, come to me with your best rewards. I'll present them to the consumer. Merchants, come to me with your best rewards paired with, pay by bank as a rail, which you might prefer, but you want to get people moved over. Bring your best rewards. Apple, will be the arbiter of trying to help the consumer decide what's best for them. And if there's no friction associated with that choice, if it can just be optimized, then literally Apple gets to pit merchants, credit card issuers, other providers of payments against each other for the benefit of the consumer. That's a world that's great for Apple. It's great for the consumer. It's not really necessarily great for people who are trying to capture and hold on to payment volume. So I'm with you. I could not be more curious about how that space evolves. And this just seems like, the tip of the spear to a much larger thing that we're going to see.
One final thought, if I may. If you want to take this to its extreme, you go look at Singapore. Singapore is notoriously value-centric and reward-centric. You will see 10% cashback, 9% cashback on certain cards. If you go to a checkout, you have 16 different options from every bank and wallet and technology company. But go look at Grab. I wrote them up this week in Brain Food because I think they just don't get enough attention in the Anglosphere and the transatlantic conversation for how much they have built a successful wallet operation. We talk about Alipay, we talk about Tencent, sure. But like being big in China is like being, just big. Like
it's just built in.
You're the moon. Of course you're big.
Right.
But what does that metaphor even mean? But the crazy thing about Grab is they went from operating a very unprofitable wallet to now tipping into profitable and a whole financial control center. They do have partnerships with banks under the hood, but fundamentally they started at the payment and have cross-sold into all of these different products around it. And they have the ability to accept payments, make payments, moved it to honors transactions, but they're also steering between your existing cards and everything that's happening underneath it. The problem with that is that's great, but they're one of many. And so every time you go to a checkout in Singapore, the merchants are just pushing a new payment button at you because they've got an incentive to do it. So if this is a balkanized world, starts to look like that checkout page where every branded checkout is shoving in front of you. I talked about Stripe Link and Shopify Pay being aggressively frictionless. Yeah, that's awesome. What does it look like when there's like 2 or 3 of them fighting to get your attention.
Yeah.
There's a nightmare scenario here, but the ultimate answer is you kind of have to end up on both sides. The banks have been forced into being a payment acceptance and a wallet player. It's a very different banking market. This is not apples to oranges, but it's instructive.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I mean, just, when I think about the future of this stuff, it's really interesting to think about where does someone like a Pays fit into this, right? Because banks are trying to get involved in the wallet game. But, I do think that, and this move from Visa is so interesting because, I think you and I have talked about this before. Visa's super smart. Like they're just super, super smart about this stuff. And they have to balance the needs of all of the different constituents that operate in their network. And so sometimes they'll do things that are very good for banks and are a little bit dicey for merchants. And then they'll do things that are better for merchants and a little bit, dicey for banks. And they always are kind of constantly triangulating. And I think in this particular case, the benefit to consumers of this flexible credential is massive and increases the value of, having multiple cards on the Visa network tremendously. But it is pushing a little bit away from for issuers, this is going to be challenging. It's going to change the competitive dynamic. So I can't wait to see how it all plays out.